I always thought a family's worst secrets would come out in whispers, behind closed doors. But in the stale hush of my father's will reading, betrayal was a thunderclap. The lawyer's voice was sharp, almost bored, as he handed Ryan, my little brother, everything. The house we grew up in, the savings, Dad's vintage cars polished every Sunday. My mother's lips barely twitched as she nodded along, her gaze landing everywhere but on me. Then it was my turn. "Alexandra Jameson," the lawyer said, sliding a single sealed envelope across the table. No smile, no explanation, just the faint scrape of paper on wood. My mother's voice was ice. "You'll have to carve your own path, Alex." I felt 1,000 things at once. Shock, embarrassment, a fury so old it almost felt familiar. Every stare in that room left a bruise. I wanted to leave, to disappear, when suddenly the lawyer's tone changed. "Wait, there's one more thing, left by your grandmother, to be read aloud, with the family present." My mother went pale. Ryan's jaw clenched. I looked down at that plain envelope, and for the first time wondered if I was the only one who didn't know how deep the lies went. That was the day ere everything changed. The day I realized some betrayals cut so deep, only the truth can bleed them out. Have you ever felt the sting of betrayal from those closest to you? Tell us in the comments below, and subscribe if you want more stories where justice whispers back. When I was young, people used to say the Jamesons were the kind of family others envied. There are photos in old albums, holidays at the lake, messy kitchen tables covered in paint and flour, Ryan and me squeezed together in matching pyjamas, Dad laughing, Mom singing along to Ella Fitzgerald. If you looked at those pictures, you'd think we were happy. Maybe once we were. But even then, I think I knew my place. Ryan was the son, outgoing, athletic, every teacher's favourite. I was the quiet orbit, always sketching in the margins, head full of colours no one else seemed to see. At every school event, it was always, "That's Ryan's sister. Isn't she the shy one?" I got used to being invisible. Dad believed in hard work and numbers. Mom believed in appearances. My sketchbooks collected dust in my room, never making it to the refrigerator door. If I tried to show them my art, Dad would shake his head. "Why can't you be more practical, like your brother?" Mom would add. "Your art is a hobby, Alex. You need to face reality." I learned to stop showing them. When Grandmother Ella got sick, things changed fast. Dad spent longer hours at work. Mom was always tense, snapping at the smallest things. Ryan drifted into his own world, and I started disappearing. The house was full of secrets, and somehow I ended up outside every closed door. But I still had Ella. She loved my drawings. She kept every birthday card, every silly little portrait. On rainy afternoons, we'd sit in her sunroom, her hands wrapped around a mug of tea, mine smudged with charcoal and hope. She was the only one who ever asked, "What do you see, Alex?" and really listened to the answer. As Ella's health faded, so did my place in the family. Calls about doctor's appointments never reached me. Decisions were made without a word in my direction. I tried to ask questions, but the answers were always the same, silence or a gentle lie. I didn't know it then, but I was already being written out of the story. The drive to Grandmother Ella's house was both familiar and foreign, every curve in the road aching with memories. The maple trees out front had already turned, their red and gold leaves spinning in circles across the porch, just like they used to when I was a child, waiting for Ella to wave from the window. The key still fit the lock, but the house seemed to hold its breath as I stepped inside, as if it remembered what it was like when laughter lived here. The first thing I noticed was how quiet it was. The clock in the hallway had stopped, the air scented faintly with lavender and old paper. I set my bag down and moved through the rooms. each one thick with dust and silence. The kitchen table was still scattered with crossword puzzles and pencils, a chipped mug on the counter. For a moment I could almost hear Ella humming as she poured tea. My fingers traced the edge of the old sideboard, the one where she kept her sketchbooks and my childhood drawings. It was there, tucked behind a stack of yellowed letters, that I found it, a worn blue sketchbook with my name scrawled across the cover in Ella's looping hand. Inside, tucked between pages of half-finished portraits, were envelopes, dozens of them, some I recognised, birthday cards I'd never received, notes for missed holidays, drawings I thought I'd lost. Others were addressed to me in Ella's careful script, sealed but never sent. I sank to the floor, heart pounding as I flipped through the letters. The words blurred together, apologies for not calling, hope that I was well, wishes that we could spend just one more afternoon together. And then I saw it in Ella's familiar ink. They said you'd moved on, that you didn't care. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears stinging my eyes. All this time I thought I'd been forgotten. But I hadn't left. I was kept away. On purpose. It was all there, the evidence of a slow, deliberate erasure. Missed calls that never came, invitations I never received, birthdays spent wondering why no one called. I remembered the year I turned 21, sitting by the phone waiting for Ella's voice. She must be busy, Mom had said, brushing it off. But now, here was the truth in my hands. I tried, I whispered. I was kept away. Tucked at the back of the sketchbook was a final note, shorter than the rest, written in a shaky hand. If you're reading this, look in the attic. The truth is waiting for you there. My breath caught. The attic door loomed at the end of the hall, the pull string swaying gently as if inviting me closer. In the farthest corner, beneath an old patchwork quilt, something metallic glinted in the gloom. My grandmother's last secret, waiting to be unburied. The key slipped into the lock with a reluctant groan. Dust shimmered in a thin shaft of sunlight, swirling through the cold attic air, tinged with the faint, familiar scent of Ella's lavender perfume. My fingers traced the rough wood and cold metal, heart pounding. The lid creaked open with a sound that echoed like distant thunder. Inside, yellowed letters and old sketches lay in careful disarray. For a moment, I closed my eyes and remembered myself as a child, knees tucked under, head resting in Ella's lap, safe and unseen by the world below. I pressed a brittle photograph to my chest, breathing in the ghost of her perfume trapped in old paper and memory. Then I looked again. Inside were documents, old, official, stamped and signed. My grandmother's careful handwriting filled the margins, post-it notes stuck between pages like breadcrumbs through a maze. At the very top was a sealed envelope marked, "For Alexandra, read with the family present." Beneath it, a thick stack, an alternate will, paperwork for an art foundation in my name, pages of bank statements and deeds I barely understood. The edges trembled in my hands as I realised what I was holding. My grandmother had built a safety net I never knew existed. The weight of it was almost crushing. For a long moment, I sat cross-legged on the attic floor, the dust swirling around me, sunlight slicing through the boards and striping my arms in gold. This was more than an inheritance, it was a confession. Proof that someone, at least, had seen what was happening to me, had tried to fight back, even if she couldn't do it while alive. My first call was to Ms. Harper, the family lawyer. Her voice on the other end was both wary and relieved. "I wondered when you'd find that," she said softly. "Ella left very specific instructions. The contents are to be opened only when everyone is present." There was a pause then. "Alexandra, are you ready for this?" I wasn't sure, but I said yes. A week later, the family gathered at Ella's house. My parents arrived in calculated silence, Mom's heels clicking across the hardwood like a metronome for tension. Dad's jaw worked behind his stoic mask, eyes scanning every detail as if searching for threats. Ryan was last, hanging back by the door, hands stuffed in his pockets. He gave me a look, uncertain, maybe even apologetic. Ms. Harper set the box on the kitchen table and cleared her throat. "Thank you all for coming. As per Ella Jameson's final wishes, we'll review these documents together." She slid the alternate will in front of my parents, watching the colour drain from Mum's face. At the kitchen table, Ms. Harper spread the documents out with deliberate slowness. Every rustle of paper felt like thunder. My parents sat opposite, perfectly still except for Dad's foot tapping a nervous rhythm under the table. Ryan's fingers traced the grain of the wood, avoiding my gaze. Before a word was spoken, the silence was so thick I could hear the wind rattling a loose pane upstairs. It was all there. Ella's desire for me to oversee the family's charitable foundation, a trust set up in my name to support underprivileged artists, and, crucially, instructions that any transfer of power had to be witnessed by the entire immediate family. Mum's voice broke the silence first. This can't be right. Ella never discussed this with us." Ms. Harper's response was crisp. Ella was clear in her wishes. She believed Alexandra was the only one who would honour the foundation's original purpose. Dad's lips curled, more insulted than surprised. "You think you're entitled to rewrite history, Alex, after all we've done for you?" I met his gaze. "You erased me to keep the family's reputation clean. All I ever wanted was to belong. All you ever wanted was control." The air sizzled with things unsaid. Light slanted in through the attic windows, catching the dust and hanging between us like a challenge. I could see Ryan, fidgeting, glancing between me and our parents, something twisting behind his eyes. Ms. Harper took a breath and opened the sealed envelope. "There's more. Ella left a letter to be read aloud." Her voice was steady as she began, but Ella's words vibrated in the air. "To my family, if you're hearing this, you already know things are not as they appeared. For too long, our story was about image, not love. I watched as Alexandra was pushed aside, told her dreams were frivolous. I watched Ryan struggle under the weight of impossible expectations. I am sorry I could not protect you both from this legacy of control." Mum shot me a look, anger and something like guilt warring in her face. Dad looked away. I realised for the first time how small he seemed. Ella's letter continued, naming the ways my parents had orchestrated every event, every decision. She mentioned the hidden letters, the calls that never reached me, the manipulation that turned siblings into strangers. Then suddenly Ryan spoke up. His voice was low, shaking. "I tried to call you last year, Alex. I wanted to tell you about Ella, about the foundation, but Mum and Dad said it would just make things worse. I should have tried harder." He looked down, shame burning in his cheeks. "I'm sorry." The words hit me harder than I expected. All this time I'd seen Ryan as an extension of our parents, a golden child, untouchable. But he was just as trapped, his loyalty weaponized. I turned back to our parents, my hands steady now. "You say you did all this for the family, but you destroyed us to save yourselves." Mom's mouth trembled, but she held her ground. "Families do what's necessary." "No," I replied. "Real families don't lie and erase their own. You wanted to control the narrative. Now you can't." The tension was electric. Miss Harper began sorting the legalities, and I watched the dust swirl through the sunlight, the truth finally visible in the air for everyone to see. The confrontation wasn't over, but for the first time the power in the room had shifted, and it was mine to wield. The air inside Ella's house felt electric, every breath heavy with accusation. My father stared at the stack of legal documents like they were a trap, while my mother clung to a crumpled tissue, the defiance in her eyes wavering for the first time. Miss Harper laid out the facts, her voice as calm as glass. Ella's wishes are clear. The foundation and its assets will transfer to Alexandra, effective immediately, with independent oversight. Your influence ends today. My father's mask broke. He slammed his palm on the table. This is madness. Everything we've built, everything your grandmother worked for, you just throw it away? I kept my gaze steady, though my hands were trembling in my lap. You didn't build any of this. You destroyed it piece by piece every time you lied, every time you pretended I wasn't your daughter, every time you made Ryan choose sides. He pointed at Ryan. We did what we had to. We wanted the best for you both. My mother's voice cracked. Alex, we were afraid. You were always so different, so stubborn. We thought if we pushed you, you'd come back to us. We never wanted to lose you. I shook my head. You lost me the moment you started rewriting the truth. You taught me silence. Now you'll learn what it means to be unheard. For a heartbeat, the room faded. In my mind, I saw a sunlit afternoon. Ryan and I as kids sprawled on the attic floor, colouring side by side, laughter echoing through the beams. For a moment, I almost believed things could have been different. Ryan shifted in his seat, the weight of years pressing down on his shoulders. For a moment, I saw the little boy who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms, who believed families were unbreakable. His hands shook as he pulled out his phone and slid it across the table. There's something else, he said, voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know what to do, but I recorded one of their conversations after Ella's funeral. I couldn't take it anymore. He played the file. My parents' voices filled the room, cold, calculating, discussing how to keep me out, how to spin the story so no one would question why I'd vanished from family events. My mother gasped, reaching for the phone. Ms. Harper stopped her with a look. That's more than enough for a formal investigation, the lawyer said quietly, now very much on my side. My father sagged, suddenly small. Alex, please, you don't want to tear this family apart. I stood. I'm not tearing it apart. I'm done pretending this is a family at all. The foundation will do what it was meant to do, support people like me, the ones nobody bothers to see, the ones you'd rather erase. Ms. Harper handed me the keys. It's official. The Jameson Foundation is yours. I turned to my parents. You have two choices. Walk away quietly, leave this behind, or I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what you did. All of it. I don't care about the family name anymore. I care about truth. My mother started to cry, soft at first, then openly sobbing. We only wanted you to be safe, she whispered. We made mistakes. Can't you forgive us? I felt a strange ache, a mixture of pity and relief. Forgiveness isn't a right. It's earned and you've done nothing to deserve it. My father took my mother's hand. As they reached the door, my mother's hand lingered on the old banister, her eyes clouded, tracing the nicks Ryan and I carved as children. For a second I saw not a villain, but a woman clinging to the last edges of a family she no longer knew how to save. Together they walked out the door, not looking back, each step echoing like a verdict. The silence left behind felt different, like a weight lifted, not an emptiness. Ryan lingered by the doorway, staring at the floor. I'm sorry, Alex, he said quietly. I should have done more. I should have stood up for you sooner. Will you ever be able to forgive me? I looked at him, searching for the boy I used to know. Maybe, I said, voice gentle but firm, but not today. He nodded, eyes wet, and left. For the first time in my life, I was alone in this house, and it didn't scare me. I walked to the window, sunlight streaming through the old curtains, the dust dancing in its beam. This was mine now, my legacy, my fight, my story. The house felt different now, as if the walls themselves had exhaled after years of holding their breath. For days I wandered from room to room, clearing out dust and shadows, letting sunlight spill onto old wood floors. The attic, once a vault of secrets, became my sanctuary. I painted the walls a pale blue, hung up Ella's favourite wind chime, and filled the space with canvases and battered sketchbooks. Sunlight filtered through the beams in the afternoon, tracing the shapes of hope and memory. Rebuilding the Jameson Foundation wasn't easy. The paperwork was endless, the past clung to every document. But for the first time I got to decide what mattered. I sat with social workers and teachers, asked what our community really needed. I listened to the stories of kids who felt invisible, kids who reminded me of myself, quiet and overlooked, desperate for a safe place to be heard. With the funds Ella left behind, I started an art therapy program at the local school and opened the foundation's doors to young artists who couldn't afford supplies. We ran digital art workshops, animation boot camps, and even hosted open mic nights for spoken word. For the first time, the foundation felt alive, less a charity, more a rebellion against silence. Our online gallery went viral, and kids who'd never shown their art to anyone saw their work shared, praised, and celebrated. We held workshops in the attic, the same room that once kept my dreams in the dark. Ryan showed up one morning, a box of paints in his hands and uncertainty in his eyes. He didn't say much at first, just rolled up his sleeves and started helping organise the next student exhibit. We worked side by side, not as siblings making up for lost years, but as two people trying to learn each other again. There were awkward silences and quick, careful questions. Sometimes he'd pause, look at an old drawing of mine and whisper, "I never knew you made this." Other times he'd share a story about Ella, things she told him too, secrets she left for both of us. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet. But it was something. My parents left town within a month, no grand goodbyes, no dramatic confrontation. They simply slipped out of our lives, a quiet consequence, not a punishment. Their names still showed up sometimes, in emails from distant relatives or old holiday cards that arrived late. I didn't hate them, I just didn't need them anymore. Instead, I found family in new places. The foundation's staff became my friends, mentors, and cheerleaders. We'd gather in the attic after hours, sharing pizza on paint-splattered floors, talking about dreams and failures, the kind of late-night confessions that heal in ways blood ties never could. One evening, as the sun dipped low, I sat at my desk in the attic, sketching the magnolia tree outside. Ryan poked his head in, his hair flecked with paint, and grinned. "You know, Ella would have loved this," he said. I smiled, feeling the truth in his words. The wounds my family left behind hadn't vanished, but for the first time they didn't ache so much. The attic wasn't a place for hiding anymore. It was where I got to begin again. That evening, as golden light filled the attic, I found the first drawing Ella ever praised. Edges curled, colours faded with time. I hung it in the centre of the studio wall. For the first time my art belonged, and so did I. Sometimes I stand in the middle of my attic studio, surrounded by canvases splashed with colour and hope, and realise how far I've come. The laughter of the young artists I mentor echoes off the beams. Kids who paint their fears, their dreams, their questions, all without apology. Their work lines the walls now, and every time I see their pride, I remember what it felt like to be invisible, desperate for a place to belong. I find myself reflecting on the long, winding road that brought me here. We can't choose where we come from, but we can choose who we become and who we let back in. Forgiveness isn't a finish line, it's 1,000 tiny choices, day after day, to leave the door cracked just enough for hope. The other night, my phone buzzed with a message from Ryan. It was simple. Thinking about inviting everyone for dinner next month. You in? I stared at the screen, heart caught between old wounds and the possibility of something new. I haven't answered him yet. Forgiveness is a journey, not a switch. Maybe with time I'll get there. Or maybe this, the life I've built, the people I've chosen to let in, is enough. Have you ever had to fight for your place in your own family? What would you do if you held the power to rewrite your story? Share your thoughts below and subscribe for more stories of silent strength and unexpected justice. All names, locations, and events in this story are entirely fictionalized for dramatic storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real persons or events is coincidental.